Hello and welcome to the Farming Today This Week podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, too hot and too dry, counting the cost of this year's harvest.
We actually started combining this morning at 6:15, which is almost unheard of for us. But by 3 o'clock this afternoon, that wheat will be down below 11%, which means we're losing over 5% in yield, which is £100 a hectare.
The plant scientists breeding crops that may be better able to cope with climate change.
When we look at the varieties today, they're not very able to perform under conditions that they were not bred for. So if you breed a racehorse, you'll get a racehorse. But that racehorse will not do good under more different conditions like the ones we're currently facing.
And as the number of Bluetongue cases continues to rise, farmers are urged to vaccinate their livestock.
We think we are not yet at the peak. It's likely from the weather patterns and midge increases that the peak of disease will be in September.
Let's start then with Harvest 2026, which will not live triumphantly in the memory of many farmers. It's been the earliest in England for 20 years, and the hot and dry weather means both cereal and vegetable harvests have been problematic. The National Farmers Union is warning of higher food prices. All week on Farming Today, we've been hearing harvest stories from around the UK and looking at what impact all this will have. Sebastian Mallet is Chief Executive of ODA UK. It's an independent grain marketing consultancy which advises cereal and oilseed farmers across the UK. I asked him how harvest has been.
So the wheat results are very, very mixed. I mean, some very good farmers we know are just harvesting 6-7 tons per hectare when they usually do 10 or 11 tons per hectare. Rapeseed is globally good for the second consecutive year. Winter barley is not too bad. Spring barley, because of the heat and the lack of moisture, is reported to be very, very poor.
These were pretty expensive crops to plant and look after because of the hikes we saw in energy and fertiliser prices. Will these lower yields mean a loss for many farmers?
Well, what you say is partially wrong, sorry to say. Fertiliser had been bought at least a year ago for these crops and were already in the field, so there is no fertiliser cost increase impact on this crop. It will happen on the next crop. So yes, costs of production have increased, fuel is more expensive, machineries are much more expensive. Globally, thanks to higher prices than last year, we consider that for farmers who did not have a yield disaster, it should be okay. For the one who are harvesting at 6 or 7 tons per hectare, the wheat, for example, the year is going to be a bit more difficult. But again, we count on higher prices for the rest of the year to partially at least compensate for these lower yields.
I've heard some farmers thinking again about what they're going to plant in the autumn, because some will point out they haven't had particularly good harvests for the last few years. And as you say, fertiliser and so on is going to be more expensive this time around. And they're looking like, is that going to be worth it? Is the gamble worth it, do you think?
Yeah, that's very true. So here we need to compare apples with apples. There are some farmers who are working on very good land, and I think these farmers will continue to make money despite higher costs because probably prices will move up in the coming years. I am much more concerned about farmers who are farming on poor land, light land, stony lands, etc. And for these farmers in the UK, but in the rest of Europe, we hear more and more farmers coming back to grass or selling their farms. We speak also with farm agents, around the UK, and it's very simple. In the entire history, they've never seen so many farms being sold around the UK.
Sebastian Mallet. In Northamptonshire, Tristan Ashby has 1,500 hectares of milling and feed wheat, barley, oilseed rape and oats. He's the fourth generation to run Grange Farm, and this is their earliest harvest for 50 years. Timing is everything when it comes to bringing in the crops, as Howard Shannon discovered as wheat was delivered to the barn.
We're checking the moisture and the protein actually at the same time through this machine before we send the samples off to the lab to have official testing done.
Just looking at it, does experience tell you anything?
You can tell about the weight of it, the bushel. You can see if they're nice bold grains or if they've been shriveled up. That's been variable this year with the heat. This grain actually doesn't look too bad. The protein, no idea until we get some infrared analysis.
So the protein's 11.8% and the moisture is 13%?
Yeah, exactly.
Is the moisture higher than you're expecting then?
Yeah, so the moisture is about perfect. It has to be under 15 to deliver it to a mill with no claims. So 13 is perfect.
Because we have had farmers on Farming Today before saying their moisture content was actually too low because you lose some money based on purely on weight.
Yeah, it's the inverse problem to what we normally have. So where we are right now, we actually started combining this morning at 6:15, which is almost unheard of for us. But by 3 o'clock this afternoon, that wheat will be down below 11%, which means we're losing over 5% in yield, which is £100 a hectare where we are now. So we'll have to stop and either move into a spring crop or go somewhere else.
So Tristan, when you realised you were facing, I think, your earliest harvest in 50 years, what planning did you have to do?
The biggest logistical challenge we've seen this harvest is actually moving the grain at harvest time to the end user. So our grain storage, for example, isn't fantastic. So we like to bring grain in and move a portion of it straight away. We've almost finished harvest and we haven't had a single lorry load leave the farm yet.
Why couldn't you just leave the wheat in the field when it's ripened and harvest it as scheduled? Why do you have to harvest early?
So as soon as the crop is ready, and particularly this is the case for milling wheat, as soon as the crop is ready, it's important to gather it in and get it in the shed. The risk of a thunderstorm or a heavy rain event on milling wheat could potentially reduce the quality completely down to feed wheat, and then you'd lose the premium in that price.
Are you in line to make a profit this year?
On the act of growing crops on pretty much all of our farms this year, we'll lose money. It'll be a negative margin. We've had one block that did quite well, but across the board, yields, I say, will be down around 20% this year.
Grange Farm supply wheat to Whitworth Brothers. The milling company is now in its second year of a programme called Rooted in Soil. The millers say it's all about looking ahead to a water-scarce future and having a viable soil to grow in. Jill Pendergrast is from Whitworth Brothers.
So we've been thinking about how we can ensure that longevity of farmers still wanting to grow milling wheat. We use about between 80 and 85% of UK wheat through our mills. So it's really important. We're such an important part of the food security of this country. So that was the real driving force behind it, was thinking about the longevity of soil health, making sure it was there, making sure that farmers want to still grow milling wheat. And so that our mills that we've heavily invested in and made super in terms of the milling technology actually have got something to mill.
Is there a likelihood, because Tristan was telling me that this year's yields could be down by 20%, so is there an imminent shortage of milling wheat?
We don't envisage that. The overall crop may be down, so from an average of maybe 14 million tonnes a year, we're expecting it to be somewhere near the 12. But the quality of the wheat that's being produced is really good this year. So the protein levels are looking high. It's very hard. If you try and bite a bit of the grain, it's really hard. It does take more energy to mill that crop, but we're fully set up to do that and then deliver the consistency of flour that our customers want. But we have no concerns. We'll be working with our millers, with our suppliers, to make sure the quality and the consistency is there throughout.
Jill Prendergast there from Whitworth Brothers Millers. Well, in England, it's been too hot and too dry for many. In Scotland, things are different. They did have hot and dry weather earlier in the summer, but now for some, rain is making things difficult, as Richard Baines has been finding out.
I'm at Strathyler Farm in Perthshire, not far from Blairgowrie, and the weather, as you can hear, is distinctly damp. The man in charge here is Adrian Ivory. Adrian, people would kill for this weather.
They would, and I'd probably kill for their weather at this time, with harvest on the doorstep, ready to go. But if the crops start going flat because the rain's too heavy, you then get sprouting, which causes a deterioration of the quality of the grain. So we dry everything that comes off the combine. We were first cutting spring barley yesterday, and with the price of red diesel and kerosene at the moment, it is costing us approximately £10 to £11 per tonne to dry it. All the spring barley used to be sold on a contract for malting for the whisky industry, but due to world economics, tariffs, cost of living, we haven't been able to get a contract for malting barley. So all this barley is now going for feed, valued at £150 a tonne roughly, whereas malting was over £200 a tonne.
Adrian Ivory in Perthshire there. Well, farmers are already beginning to make decisions about what they'll grow for next year's harvest. With the hot, dry weather continuing, not to mention the situation in the Strait of Hormuz making diesel and fertiliser prices volatile, those decisions aren't easy. Sarah Swadling's been to a farm near Newbury in Berkshire, which has only seen 39 millimetres of rain, which is about 1.5 inches, since March.
I'm walking across a freshly cultivated field with Eleanor Gilbert and Dan Willis. You can just see where the stubble's been broken up a bit and the very uppermost surface of the soil has been scuffed up. But my goodness, every step I'm taking, my boots are kicking up a little mini cloud of dust. What was it like cultivating this, Eleanor?
I couldn't see anything. It just created a wall of dust. I couldn't see my cultivator. Every time I turned, I couldn't see my next line. Luckily, I had GPS. I had to pull up in the end because I was causing a bit of chaos.
What sort of chaos?
I think there was swamp in the village.
He told me I was fired and I have to go and get a duster and clean everyone's windows now.
What are the chances of the next crop that you drill here growing in these conditions if we don't have any more rain soon?
Well, this is the roll of the dice, isn't it? I mean, this is destined for oilseed rape. It's capable of producing some reasonably good yields if you get that magical input out of the sky.
You would normally then be hoping to drill to sow oilseed rape.
Yes.
Now, really?
Yeah, well, in the next week or so, we would look to be planting. Will we do it? Is the next question.
Oh, the seed costs so much. How much have you just bought your oilseed rapeseed for?
It's colossal, isn't it? Yeah, I dread to think it's, you're putting another £70 a hectare in the ground. Plus, we will need to grow a companion crop with it.
That confuses the flea beetle.
Confuses the flea beetle. So there's another added cost of another £15, £16 a hectare.
With some of your other costs then, how much might it cost you to grow a hectare of oilseed rape, and what might you be paid for that?
Well, I suppose, roughly speaking, you would be somewhere up to £800 or £900 a hectare by the time you're all in. And we've achieved, this year we've sort of done the farm average, which is just about 4 tonne a hectare. This year the prices is up at between £400 and £420. So it's a reasonable margin. But when you start adding in things like a mortgage, a rent, you start putting those bigger overheads in, HP on more machinery. By the time you've done that to try and cut your costs, because you've bought the bigger machinery to cover more acres, but actually you're servicing more debt.
When you look across this slightly dusty field, can you see in your mind's eye in 6 months' time this is all going to be green?
I hope so.
Yeah, of course it will. It's the farmer optimism. I'm sure it will be. A bumper harvest is always but a year away. Don't know what year that might be, but it's a year away. We seem to plant in hope and harvest in vain, and that sums up farming.
Dan Willis and Eleanor Gilbert talking there to our reporter Sarah Swadling in a dry and dusty Berkshire. So, as farmers experience the effects of climate change this harvest, what crops could they plant in the future to help them cope with weather extremes? That's a question I put to Dr. Christabel Wawe, Head of Research at the John Innes Centre.
We think a lot about the heat and drought now, but we've also had waterlogging a few years ago, and we have all these different climate conditions. So what we're trying to do is to develop crops that would be able to grow under more different scenarios of growth or different climates that we're seeing over these past few years. And for that, we are making plants that have, let's say, steeper roots that interact better with microbes, that need less fertilizer, or that can grow under shorter conditions, especially when you have waterlogging.
So for a farmer who ideally now would like a crop which could withstand a lot of heavy rain all at once and then a drought, how realistic is that wish?
I mean, I don't want to promise silver bullets here because biology is complex, and it's not normal for a plant to experience, let's say, an extreme weather event like waterlogging at the beginning of the season and then be able to recover and then have drought at the other end. So I think one of the challenges we have is that we'll need to have more diversity in the crops we grow, and we'll have some crops that will be adapted at let's say, waterlogging conditions, or that can grow under a shorter period, so we can sow them, let's say, late in the winter or the beginning of spring. But then that same crop, I don't think at the moment we can promise is make a crop that will also be able to adjust to drought and heat stress at the end of the season. So it will be probably thinking about the type of weather we're going to have in the next year and think about a variety of crops that might allow us to hedge our bets and leverage those conditions rather than having the current case where we have one type of crop that flowers within a window of 1 week, all the varieties of wheat flower within a window of 1 week, and everything is very, very uniform. We might need to have more diversity in our farming systems.
Is there anything that you can offer farmers who are now thinking about what they're going to plant to harvest next year, 27?
Over the last 100 years of modern breeding, we've always bred for a particular type of farming, which is usually a high input farming with a large amount of energy being put in through pesticides and through fertilizers and so on. But for about 8,000 years, we had agriculture that was much less intensive in terms of the inputs that we introduced. When we look at the varieties today, they're not very able to perform under conditions that they were not bred for. So if you breed a racehorse, you'll get a racehorse. But that racehorse will not do good under more different conditions like the ones we're currently facing. So I think that for us it's really important to think how we can use that diversity that we left behind in modern breeding to be able to then deploy that into fields. And that's one of the approaches that we're doing. We're taking collections of wheat land races. These will be the varieties of wheat that were grown by our grandfathers in the 1920s, perhaps. And these lines would have been locally adapted to a wide range of different climatic conditions. But when we started modern breeding, we left behind more than 50% of the genetic diversity. That was never used again. So now we're recovering that diversity and using it on our farms. And that's thanks to tools like precision breeding, but also advances in DNA technology and others.
Dr. Christopher Wawe, Head of Research at the John Innes Centre. Well, away from harvest, farmers are being strongly urged to vaccinate sheep and cattle to protect them from the rapid spread of Bluetongue. The UK's chief vet, who we'll hear from later, says vaccination is the only way to deal with this disease. There are now more than 200 cases in the UK. That's more than double the number this time last week. The vast majority are in England, with most in the southwest. There have been 5 cases in Wales. There are none in Scotland or Northern Ireland. Now, bear in mind here that cases means farms affected rather than individual animals with this disease. Bluetongue is nasty. It can make sheep and cattle lethargic and lame. It can cause birth defects or spontaneous abortions, and it can be fatal. Cheryl Cottle-Hunkin farms in Devon, where she's also a Liberal Democrat councillor and a County Council Cabinet member for Rural Affairs. She's written to the government urging ministers to improve testing and communication and to fund a national vaccination programme. She says the disease is devastating.
This strain that is out this year is a lot more serious. We're seeing animals just dropping down dead in the fields. I've been feeling guilty because we didn't vaccinate for it last year. Everyone's ordering in the vaccine now. It takes 3 weeks to work. We don't 100% know that we've got it, but we've had blood tests taken, but the tests take 2 weeks to come back to confirm whether it is that or not. It's really tough, so I just want to make sure that people know they're not alone.
Cheryl Cottle-Hunkin in Devon there. Well, this disease is spread by midges. Originally, they were blown over from Europe, but now they and the virus survive the winter here. This year's heatwave means more midges, and the virus is replicating much more quickly. It doesn't affect either humans or food safety. Now, all the cases this year have been the strain called Bluetongue 3. There is a vaccine, but as we've discussed before on this programme, take-up has been low. I asked Phil Stocker, Chief Executive of the National Sheep Association, why.
The sheep industry, had been lulled into a false sense of security simply because we didn't see the level of outbreaks that were predicted last year. And then, of course, we went all the way through the late autumn and the winter and the spring where every case that was being reported was in cattle and not sheep. And then suddenly, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had this real explosion in North Devon around that Exmoor and West Somerset region. And I guess it's just caught people by surprise, really.
The chief vets have got together now across the country to urge farmers to vaccinate now before the breeding season. This comes at a difficult time of year. Money is very tight, partly because of the drought. New analysis we've got from the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit reckons that grass growth for the last week in July was half its 5-year average. Farmers have got a lot on, so will they vaccinate?
I think they will now. I mean, one of the reasons why farmers haven't vaccinated in the past, because they felt that this wasn't going to be the issue or the problem that was being predicted, and that we saw, I suppose, in Holland and Belgium and Germany. But now, I don't think there's any doubt that people are going to be taking up the vaccine now.
How do you think the testing regime is holding up, given that there's now so much demand?
Well, I think there's several issues there. I guess one of the problems is that on any suspected premises, the testing is only being done on up to 3 animals. And I think that's one of our problems, that there will be multiple animals on those premises being affected. So the testing is definitely not happening at the speed we would like. We're told that the Pirbright facilities are still within the capacity, but the whole supply chain, I think, the vets coming out, taking samples and then posting them, by the time those samples arrive at Pirbright, there is a delay. And it would be great to think that we could speed that up a little bit.
Are farmers going to have to take a bit of control here? Because the chief vet in Wales particularly has underlined the importance of knowing the health and vaccination status of an animal you might be buying in, particularly if it's coming from an area with a lot of bluetongue.
There's no doubt about that. There is one way for farmers to protect their stock, and that is through vaccination. And we're starting to see the uptake of vaccine because of that. In the sheep industry, we are approaching our main breeding sales seasons, where we're going to see breeding stock move down from some of the upland areas and northern areas, I guess, down into southern Britain. That would be a normal routine thing. But there's going to be a lot of farmers in the south of England now that are going to be really nervous about bringing naive, unprotected stock on their farms.
Phil Stocker from the National Sheep Association. Well, some agricultural shows have cancelled livestock classes to try to reduce the risk of infection, and a Bluetongue webinar organised by the Agriculture and Horticulture Development Board earlier this week attracted 1,000 people. The chief vets from England, Wales and Scotland are all urging farmers to vaccinate their livestock. Christine Middlemas, chief vet for England and the UK, told me it's part of an industry-wide campaign.
We, with industry, so Battle Bluetongue, for example, have worked very hard together to get the messages out, working with National Beef Association, National Sheep Association, AHDB have been doing a fantastic job. Inevitably, people don't listen to all the messages that come from government, but to have others saying those same messages on board, information is out there.
Let's talk about the testing. There are some concerns about it. Firstly, the time it can take just to notify. Some people saying that has taken up to an hour. And then the time the testing system takes, so you can be a couple of weeks before you get the result back. That's too long, surely.
Yes, that is quite a long time. The time to notify really just depends on if there's a flurry of calls all at one time and so on, and we were working through that. What we found with the process in the testing, we have had a large number of samples that have not had complete information. So that is either a full identification number of the animal, or indeed we've had samples that didn't come in with which premise it is. And those take up a lot of chasing. We cannot report without that information. We can't confirm disease. So I do urge those sending in samples, we need the complete information. And we are checking back through the process to make it as efficient and as effective as we possibly can do.
Does that really explain, though, the amount of time it takes? There is only one place that does this for the whole of the UK, which is Pirbright. Obviously, we're speaking in the middle of the school holidays as well. Can you increase capacity?
So we are working with Pirbright to increase capacity as much as they can, given, as you noted, school holidays and things. And we are also talking to other laboratories, Scottish Government and Welsh Government as well, about bringing other labs into the system.
But might farmers be a little bit frustrated listening to this? You say that the government's been aware that this could be an issue, it's been trying to publicise it, and yet the government, you, haven't been talking to other labs, for instance, to say, look, we might need more capacity, can you help us out?
There's a whole decision for them about what their prioritisation, do they have the right health and safety standards in that lab, for example? It's not just, oh, here's a test kit, off you go and do it. There are various health and safety and other legal standards and requirements that they must meet to be able to do it. So we have been and are working through it, but it's just not a quick process.
Let's talk about vaccination. If you're so worried about it, why doesn't the government now just foot the bill?
The vaccine is available, running at £2.50 to £3 a dose. I don't think government footing the bill makes any difference to its availability.
If you vaccinate now, how long before your stock's protected?
So it's 1 jag for sheep and 2 for cattle. Immunity increases from the time of that jag and takes about 2 weeks to be fully effective.
Some might feel that it's a bit late, particularly if they're in the southwest of England.
The risk is now, but it's still worth vaccinating. We think we are not yet at the peak of the Bluetongue season, as we've seen in other years. So it started a bit earlier, but it's likely from the weather patterns and midge increases that the peak of disease will be in September. So there are still weeks to be active in vaccination and protect your herd and flock.
The UK's chief vet, Christine Middlemas. And that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Rebecca Rooney. And Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.